I think in the story, I might not have the words perfectly right, but I think something like the light of truth and love will never die. And here I am with a sermon prepared on the third source of Unitarian Universalism, which seems like quite an emotional shift from the beginning of our service. But I invite you to come along with me because I think we might find something in our broad religious tradition that allows us to open to so many sources of truth and meaning that might be helpful for us in this time of grief. That's one thing I've always appreciated about Unitarian Universalism is that we're not limited to just one source of spiritual wisdom. We have 6 particular sources from which to draw, and the third source, which I'm talking about today, opens up quite literally a world of religions from which we may draw wisdom and inspiration. And this was really important to me because years ago when I was looking for a spiritual home, I was so happy to have found a religion in which many spiritual influences were not only accepted, but they were also encouraged. And as I've often said before, we UUs have this really broad menu from which to choose. We have the grandest of all buffets, spiritual buffets. And I've even gone so far to say that this buffet is open 24 hours and it's all you can eat. But yet, there is an art. There should be a kind of carefulness when incorporating practices and wisdom from various world religions into our own lives and our own practices. I mean, I think we've all known those folks who are kind of like chronic religious and spiritual dabblers, right? Who are, they explore especially the religious trends, the spiritual trends. They buy all the jewelry and all the stuff, the trinkets. There was a time back, I don't know, probably at least 10 years ago, when everyone in Hollywood was studying Kabbalah. Yeah, some of you remember that too, most of whom had no background in Judaism whatsoever. And, I'm not saying this is wrong or even a bad thing. I mean, possibly some of the celebrities found, life-changing and transformational meaning through Kabbalah, but I imagine others were simply riding the trendy bandwagon. I remember one minister's comments on this idea of being a religious dabbler. She poked my fun at the people who say something like, well, I really kind of consider myself a Buddhist. Her response to this was, would a real Buddhist consider you a Buddhist? And I think she had a point. Eventually the dabbling and the considering, it has to end, and something that resembles a commitment has to happen. This commitment is necessary if you're really going to grow spiritually. If you're seeking to gain a sense of meaning and purpose and grounding in life, you have to commit to something. And this commitment, it doesn't come for free. It takes time, it takes study, it takes practice, it takes reflection, to internalize and to incorporate this new spiritual wisdom into our lives, no matter what tradition it might be from. And if it's not done with that kind of depth, it can go to dangerous places. It can go to a superficial place, or it can go to an even worse place. We call this worst place appropriation, right? When we're kind of dabbling and practicing in a religion that really is not ours. But yet it's hard, because sometimes the lines are blurry between what is religious appreciation and religious appropriation. Now, an invitation to participate in another's religion is a wonderful thing. It's a gateway to building understanding and relationships. I've been to the Islamic Center where I was invited to observe the prayers before the Iftar feast, which marks the end of Ramadan, and the feast was pretty delicious too. And it was a beautiful experience of cross-religious understanding. But acting without an invitation or performing a religious ritual or practice without the participation or the advice from a true practitioner of this tradition, it can end up like poor play acting, right? A really bad parody instead of a sincere spiritual practice. And sometimes UUs, in their enthusiasm for adapting and learning about new traditions, they ask their UU ministers to do some kind of really uncomfortable things. They sometimes ask us to lead Passover seders, Muslim prayer services, and other native rituals of groups we are not natives of. So then we very politely say no to these requests because they would be appropriation. So the lines are a bit blurry, but one thing is usually for certain. The real ritual done by a native practitioner is always better than a reenactment or a recreation. So if a UU Buddhist group wants to do a UU Buddhist service, that's great. The knowledge, the depth, the reverence for the tradition and its practices are there. And again, there's nothing ever wrong with learning about traditions. I mean, that's great. It's just the practice of them, right? The practice of them, which has to be careful and sensitive. Again, the red flags go up if you are practicing a ritual that belongs to a culture of which you are not a part. But all of that aside, back to what I really love about our spiritual variety, the buffet, is that there's been a trend in Unitarian Universalism, maybe over the past, I don't know how many years, 10 plus years, is how we often describe ourselves as religious hybrids, usually with some kind of hyphen in between. Examples like, I'm a UU Buddhist, I'm a UU Christian, I'm a UU pagan, I'm a UU Jew, or my favorite description of a UU Jew is a Junitarian. But actual practicing Jews would probably not find that so funny. Again, talking about the lines. And we have UU humanists among many others. And I like that our religion is open and expansive enough to accommodate these different potential theologies, so much that people are willing to self-identify, right, as these UU kind of hybrid things. But then again, having an identifier like this, it's not required. These labels, they can be helpful or they can be really self-limiting. So, because we're always growing and changing and perhaps incorporating new ideas into our theology. When asked, some Unitarian Universalists openly, and this is fine, identify as, I'm just still trying to figure it all out, and that's okay. There are some people who just simply define themselves as Unitarian Universalists. Some, even one theology student I met identified herself as a hardcore Unitarian Universalist. In fact, that was her email address. I don't identify as one of these UU hyphenated things because I find it kind of reductive and limiting, and it's also hard for ministers because if we identify as something, one particular thing, sometimes not trouble boiling my theological influences down into one hyphenate. But then again, I will, if you have some time and you want to hear me explore all the nuances of my own personal theology, I will be happy to tell you. But the bottom line here, it's all really about what you do with your personal theology, whatever it is, how you apply it to your life, to find hope and meaning and purpose. And I think that's the most interesting part of all. So there's the late Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Dr. Forrester Church, or Forrest Church. Yes, his last name is Church, which is very appropriate. He has this rather famous essay in UU circles called The Cathedral of the World. And I share this reading in new member class because I just think it's a really rich metaphor. It's so great. I've shared it in worship services before. He has this idea, this description, that the idea is that we are all, everyone in existence, the whole world, all of us, everyone in the world is in this huge cathedral, not a particularly religious cathedral, he's just casting an image. So everyone of all faiths is in this cathedral. And he says, we're in this cathedral, it has many, many windows, more than you could ever look through in one lifetime. His bottom line is that we're all viewing the same light, but we're looking through many different windows. So the light is the same, but our view, how the light is refracted, the lens from which we see it is different. but in the end, it's all the same light we're viewing. So I think I love this metaphor because it provides a framework, for understanding why humanity's religious beliefs are so diverse. This metaphor, it really paints what I see as a vibrant picture. I can picture my cathedral and at least some of the windows. I don't know if you can. But the windows represent different theologies, different religions. Again, but just as a way to look at the same light that's being refracted through these various windows. And and we're all in the cathedral together. Everyone is in there. We're all in the same boat, even though in our lifetimes we'll never know the whole cathedral or all the people in it. And each window tells a different story about where we came from, what it means to be here, the purpose of life, the mystery of death. And each of us has a favorite window, or maybe if you're a Unitarian Universalist, you might have several favorite windows that you enjoy a lot. Because we're all different. We all have different needs. Different views work, for different people. But in our favorite window through our chosen lens, that favorite window allows us to be best able to access that light's truth refracted through that particular window. Particular windows make it all clear to us, It gives us the best access we can get to life's meaning and purpose. So some may prefer the Buddhist window, some may prefer the atheist window, some, again, like many you use, like a few different windows. And we like to compare and contrast the differences of what we see through them. Forrest Church has some really good things to say about this metaphor he's put before us. He says, fundamentalists of the right and the left, yes, there's fundamentalism of the left, claim that the light shines through their window only. Skeptics can make a similar mistake, only to draw the opposite conclusion. Seeing the bewildering variety of windows and observing the folly of all the worshipers, they conclude that there is no light. But the windows are not the light. The whole light, God, truth, call it whatever you will, is beyond our perceiving. He goes on, religious is dangerous, of course, because its power is independent of its claims. Every generation has its terrorists for truth and God, hard-bitten zealots for whom the world is large enough for only one true faith. They have been taught to worship at one window and then to prove their faith by throwing rocks through other people's windows. Going on further, he says the fundamentalist salvation is contingent on their one window being the right window, so that means that the other windows must be ignored or converted or destroyed. But rejecting the windows of religion altogether, folks who say, I'm having none of this, this presents a problem too. First, it means you don't get to encounter the mysteries of life and the glimpses of illumination that you could get through those windows. The other truth is that no one can really escape the windows. Every ideology, every scientific worldview has windows in the cathedral of the world. No matter what, even for the totally anti-religious non-believer, there's a window that you're looking through. In each window, the light and darkness mingle in ways that suggest meaning for those whose angle of vision is tilted in that particular direction. These people are also worshipers. Their windows too become shrines, even those decidedly anti-religious windows. He continues, none of us is fully able to perceive the truth that shines through another person's window, nor the falsehood that we may perceive as truth. Thus, we can easily mistake another's good for evil and our own evil for good. Very humbling. And then he summarizes the situation in what he calls a universalist theology. That's a universalist with a small u theology. The theology goes like this. He says there is one reality, one truth, shining through every window in the cathedral. No one can see the light directly, the mystery being forever veiled. Yet the light seen by each beholder, refracted and reflected through different windows in different ways, plays in patterns that suggest meaning, challenging us to interpret and live by the meaning as best we can. So through each window shines truth. That's truth with a capital T. In a different way, leading to different truths, that's truths with a small t, and these differing according to the insight and receptivity of the beholder. There's one big truth out there, filtering through the windows becomes multiple smaller truths for the beholder. The bottom line is that in our search for the big capital T truth, we come away with other truths, those little truths that may differ greatly. And because we only have the partial understanding of the light of truth, we must respect differing insights and credit them with a measure of small t truth as well, even when that small t truth may conflict with the truth, small t truth, that we ourselves embrace. The same light shines through all windows, but each window is different. The windows modify the light, refracting it in myriad ways, shaping it in different patterns, suggesting different meanings. For each of us to grow in faith and understanding, we can do no better than to cultivate and develop particular meanings reflected in our own traditions and cultures. Aspiring to see the refracted light as clearly as we can, we act upon our insights as best we may. So all of this stuff from Forest Church, I really think it's him introducing us to our third source of Unitarian Universalism, which is the wisdom of world religions, through this big metaphor, this giant metaphor of the cathedral of the world. But he takes issue with the 24-hour buffet I was talking about earlier, and I think he has a point. He calls it, and it's kind of what I was, warning about earlier, he calls it the smorgasbord approach to religion, a little too much of everything, leaving us with a stomach ache and a confused palate. So again, probably more than gorging, we should use some restraint. But this cathedral approach to world religions, he says, it makes UUs almost unique among the world's faiths, simply because we draw inspiration through other religions as well as our own. Within our churches, we acknowledge the presence of many different windows, celebrate a wide variety of festivals in an attempt to divine the essential meaning of each, and at our best, we truly welcome and respect the insights of others. We are always seeking new guidance from ancient sources for the shaping of our ethical and spiritual lives. By remaining open to the insights of others, we may augment our own cherished traditions and expand the scope of our faith. And Forrest's final thought in his essay is a reminder to be humble, especially when we are absolutely sure we are right. So really, I believe that our third source is an open door, through which very few religions are willing to go. And incorporating world religions into a particular faith tradition is still a pretty radical and spectacular idea, right? I mean, who else gets to do that? So I think, feel free to learn about the world's religions, because this knowledge, it's power. Knowledge is the key to understanding. And knowledge of world's religions is, a real lifesaver in our increasingly multi-faith society. Especially when there's a lot of fake news about religion out there. I don't even need to go into that, you know what I'm talking about. The time is to be careful is with rituals and practice, not in knowledge. It's good to find mentors and teachers who know the tradition you're interested in, follow the lead of actual practitioners, native practitioners, and take the time to learn and respect and internalize and really understand what you're doing before you try to do all of this by yourself or lead it on your own. Another point I'd like to make is that although we often like to focus on the common things between religions, that's also a thing you like to do, is find all the commonalities. We still have to acknowledge and respect that there are differences, real differences between religions. So, contrary to the opinion of some, all religions are not ultimately the same. We can't reduce them down to the exact same core, although they do have some commonalities. But yet, there are similar purposes and motivations behind religions, right? religion has emerged as a way for human beings to find understanding and meaning and hope and purpose. And to answer all of those difficult questions everyone faces in life. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens when we die? Does all of this existence even have a point? But the methods and answers for, asking all of those different questions really are not the same across world religions. And it's also hard, I found it hard, I struggle, to get along with people who are throwing rocks at my cathedral window, right? So we have to remind ourselves that not all religious people of various traditions are rock throwers, right? Perhaps if everyone realizes that we really are just responding to different refractions of light with different interpretations, maybe humanity can stop all the rock throwing and the fighting over which window is the best and move on to really improving the conditions in the cathedral, right? So that everyone in the cathedral has what they need to, survive and to thrive. But, until that day comes, if it ever does, I hope it does, it will come not by us insisting that our own cathedral view is the best, even though if we get to use more windows than anybody else, right? Because that's just another way of saying, well, we have the ultimate truth, when we don't. All of this will come when we become more curious and knowledgeable and accepting of the window views of others. So today, rather than getting hung up on whose light is the best, let's focus on our common humanity. We're all in the cathedral together. We're all the human family in the big cathedral. And let's use that frame to make connections and build relationships. And let's keep on working on increasing our humility and decreasing our need to